Hey everybody, welcome back to the Man vs. Weed Cannabis Review podcast that may harm your baby if consumed while breastfeeding. I'm your host, Tango Hotel Charlie. This week we're back on track and my lovely wife has picked up some single-gram samples for me to try. Yesterday I made some amazing medicated brownie brittle using a half cup of strong infused coconut oil. I did one batch with Reese's Pieces and the other with chocolate chips. Real simple, tasty, and potent. Great for taking fishing or hiking or whatever the fuck you like to do. Gummies and chocolates can melt in the warmer months, so this brittle is great for road trips. I modified a basic recipe off the internet, and I'll try to include it in the show notes for y'all. If you make a batch yourself, make sure you post pictures of it on the Man vs. Weed hashtag. I want to see what you got out there. This week I had to take Robin to a different store because the cannabis store we had been going to only had the same 3 selections that I reviewed over the last 4 episodes. Since we were there, we grabbed every 1 gram offering in the store. All 3 of them. Pathetic. Okay, so yeah, this week we're going to look at Ultra Sour by Namaste, a Cannabis brand. These companies are so shady, I had trouble figuring out where to even start. So let's take a look at Namaste to begin with. Namaste was founded by a guy named Sean Dollinger. They could have had his face on the Wikipedia page for culture vultures. His most recent endeavor is a vegan company. He even became a vegan just to sell his products in a sort of method-acting business model. Anyway, just weeks before legalization day, he was caught lying to investors about divesting U.S. assets. Instead, what he actually did was sell it to company insiders at a marked-up price. He also raised money with the underlying promise of a guaranteed return, which he would have been busted for had he not been living in the Bahamas at the time. In an attempt to gain investor confidence, he lied to them about being listed on the Nasdaq. This listing, in fact, didn't even exist. He hosted a pledge party in an attempt to circumvent the CQDC. The CQDC is the government-owned legislative monopoly on the sale of recreational cannabis in the province of Quebec. This illegal pledge party was hosted by none other than Snoop Dogg. It had models dressed as sexy nurses, and they were getting shareholders in attendance to not sell their stock for an extended period of time. Sean Dollinger posted up a video apologizing for this event, claiming responsibility for the sexy nurse costumes. He claimed he was just trying to educate people. Lol. Back then, Tilray had a distribution deal with Namaste. As a result of their shady business dealings, Tilray cut ties with them immediately. And despite all these obvious crimes, no legal action was ever taken against them. Must be nice, huh? Yeah, so after lying to investors, shareholders, and Canadian regulators, and attempting to hide U.S. assets from the Justice Department, the powers that be over at Namaste had enough of his bullshit and fired founding CEO Sean Dollinger. He was replaced by some other guy, and the stocks continued to plummet by 27%. Sean sued Namaste. Namaste sued Sean. In the end, they eventually settled with each other and absolutely nothing changed. And their parent company, Cannabis, isn't a whole lot better. Back in 2018, they received government funding under the guise of providing jobs. Again, massive greenhouses were built, promises were made, a distribution deal through Shoppers Drug Mart, and a failed cannabis drink line later, they were starting to take on water. Leadership changes happened, sure, but these guys went through 4 CEOs in 2 years and 3 CFOs in 18 months. Bleeding money like teenagers in a slasher film, they accrued debt to the tune of $58 million. In an attempt to pull out of this death spiral, they started selling those greenhouses at a 40% discount. In an attempt to transition from the failed cultivation model to a strictly distribution model. Stocks reflected this turmoil and dropped from $5.59 back in 2018 to 5.5 cents at the end of 2020. Finally, this year, Hexo moved in, and in an attempt to gain a larger footprint in the impending legalization in the US, they bought Cannabis for $186 million back in February. You might ask yourself, why do we need to know all this? The answer is, because you should know who you are giving your money to. Why your cannabis is so expensive. Because you're paying for boys in suits who know nothing about it to play cannabis. So back to the Ultra Sour. It is allegedly a 21% THC sativa dominant hybrid. Its listed terpenes are terpinolene, limonene, caryophyllene, and beta-pinene, with aromas of citrus and diesel. It came in your typical stupid plastic jar and was dated January 16th, 2021, so just over 4 months old. The stupid plastic jar had the child safety lid and the typical pull and lift terp spirit seal. I cracked that seal and smelled the exact same lime smell as the limelight from Redican. Like, exact same. Think lime powder candy from the 80s if you're old as fuck like I am. Anyways, it turns out they're the exact same lineage, so that checks out. Visually though, this gram was fucking pitiful. Light green and brown bud crumbles. Sad little wispy pieces with lots of leafy bits and crumbs. Visually, it looked small, so I weighed it. Sure enough, it was under a gram. It was exactly as dry as fuck, like every other sample I've had yet. Under the microscope, the trichomes are chunky, withered, and damaged. They used to make rock candy on a string. If you've ever seen that, that's what they look like. I couldn't see any heads, and as such, I couldn't tell you if they were clear, amber, or cloudy. They just appear sad and corroded. I normally make a video of busting up the bud on my Man vs. Weed hashtag, and this one was no different. You can go take a look at it yourself, but when I went to crush it up on video, as soon as I squished it, a seed popped out. A fucking seed. I couldn't believe it. Anyways, when I crushed it up in my fingertips, it crackled into a dusty powder. Not unlike all the rest, it leaves no stickiness, no residue, no powder of any sort. The lime candy scent, however, is persistent the entire time. So much so I can actually smell it on my fingers, and I wonder if it's treated with that smell. But they wouldn't do that, would they? Would they? Now, thanks to being underweight and a fine ground powder, it struggled to fill the rolling paper. I rolled it in a raw organic with a glass tip and had to twist it at the end. One, because it just didn't fill the joint all the way. And two, because it was so fucking dry it was pouring out of the end. The lime taste came through while smoking it, but the smoke was rather harsh on the lungs and throat. If for no other reason because it was, as I mentioned, exactly dry as fuck. And it burned okay. The ash was a light gray, which is actually pretty good for legal cannabis, and it burned okay. However, it did need to be relit a few times. The buzz was a solid medium. I waked and baked, and while it wasn't what you would call fire, there was an okay heady high to it that lasted about an hour or so. All in, it was $10 a gram with tax, and that works out to $280 an ounce. So for those counting, that's almost $300 an ounce for overdried, underweighed, irradiated bud crumbles with a seed in it, and an okay effect. And a pleasant lime smell if you're into that sort of thing. The effect was probably one of the best I've tried on the legal market yet, but that's a fucking low bar. I don't know, maybe if you got a whole ounce you would get some better looking buds, but they would still be dry. And if I got a seed in 1 gram, imagine how many seeds you're going to get in 28 grams. I just wouldn't feel confident making that investment. So I'm going to have to pass on Ultra Sour from Namaste. Thanks again for taking the time to smoke a joint with me. If you like the podcast, make sure you feed that algorithm your delicious likes, subs, comments, and reviews. If you would like to find me on Twitter, I'm Street Villain, and if you'd like to send me an email, it's manversusweedthc@gmail.com. Until next time, stay high and free the motherfucking weed.